In January 2026, 7 European leaders issued a joint statement condemning the United States, not Russia, not China, not Iran, but America, the nation that has protected Europe for over a century. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen warned that American action in Greenland could mean the end of the transatlantic partnership, a partnership built on the graves of over 500,000 Americans who died defending Europe. This is not a story about Greenland. This is a story about ingratitude, about a continent that America has saved again and again, only to be criticized the moment its own interests are asserted. To understand the depth of this betrayal, we must start at the beginning. In the summer of 1914, the great powers of Europe looked across the Atlantic at America and saw a provincial backwater, a nation of farmers and shopkeepers, unworthy of a seat at the table of empires. The American army numbered just 98,000 men, smaller than Romania's. Kaiser Wilhelm dismissed the United States as a nation incapable of fighting. British officers joked that Yankees were good at making money, but knew nothing of real warfare. And yet, when the guns of August 1914 thundered across Europe, these empires found themselves drowning in blood, begging that provincial backwater for help. By 1917, the proud empires were exhausted. French soldiers mutinied, entire regiments refusing to advance further into machine gun fire. Russia collapsed completely, freeing German divisions to push west. And in their darkest hour, Europe called for help. America answered, not because Europe deserved it, but because Americans believed in freedom. Within 18 months, America mobilized over 4 million soldiers, sending 2 million to France. They fought battles Europe could not, like Belleau Wood and the Meuse-Argonne offensive, suffering tens of thousands of casualties to break German lines. By November 11, 1918, the war was over. Over 116,000 Americans had given their lives on European soil. Young men from Kansas, California, and New York sacrificed to save nations that had mocked their country. And how did Europe repay them? They squabbled over the spoils, nursed old hatreds, and prepared to repeat the mistakes that led to yet another catastrophe. After World War I, Europe barely learned anything. The interwar years were marked by reparations, appeasement, and wishful thinking. Hitler rearmed Germany. Britain and France hoped threats would vanish if they ignored them. On September 1st, 1939, German tanks rolled into Poland. France collapsed within 6 weeks. The British Army escaped Dunkirk, abandoning tanks, artillery, and trucks. Europe stood humiliated. Once again, America was called upon. Despite its exhaustion from the First World War and European ingratitude, America answered. Through the Lend-Lease program, over $50 billion in aid was sent to allied nations, equivalent to nearly $700 billion today. Factories across the United States produced weapons, vehicles, and food in quantities that staggered the imagination. By 1944, America was producing 60% of all Allied munitions. British forces received over $31 billion in aid. The Soviet Union received over $11 billion. Stalin himself admitted that without American trucks and food, Russia could not have survived the German onslaught. Then came D-Day, June 6, 1944. American soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy, climbing cliffs under German machine gun fire. Over 2,000 men fell in a single morning just to establish a foothold. From Normandy to Berlin, American forces carried the spear into the heart of Nazi Germany, fighting battles like the Battle of the Bulge, where 19,000 Americans died, stopping Hitler's last desperate offensive. When the guns fell silent in May 1945, 400,000 Americans had never returned home. Europe was free, but utterly dependent on American mercy and generosity. America did not stop at victory. The Marshall Plan pumped $13 billion into European reconstruction, equivalent to $150 billion today. Factories rebuilt, cities restored, lives saved. In 1948, Stalin blockaded West Berlin. America responded with the Berlin Airlift, flying 2.3 million tons of supplies into the city over 15 months. 31 American pilots died keeping Berlin free. NATO was formed in 1949, placing Western Europe under the American nuclear umbrella. Over 430,000 American troops stationed in Europe during the Cold War. The U.S. funded bases across West Germany, Britain, Italy, Spain, and Turkey. The total cost to American taxpayers exceeded $13 trillion. Yet European nations began to take this for granted. Sheltered under the American nuclear umbrella, governments built welfare states, free universities, generous pensions, and 6-week vacations without paying the true cost of their own defense. Defense budgets shrank. Germany's army went from over 500,000 to under 200,000 troops. Britain cut back its navy and army year after year. European nations promised 2% GDP defense spending, then quietly failed to meet it. In 2014, Putin invaded Crimea. Europe struggled to enforce sanctions, reluctantly complying only when America pushed. By 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and Europe again found itself unprepared. Ukraine fired thousands of shells per day, while Europe could barely supply half the promised artillery. Once again, American factories filled the gaps. $175 billion in aid, Abrams tanks, Patriot missiles, and logistic support. And now in January 2026, European leaders who for decades relied on American protection condemn America over Greenland. President Trump's interest in Greenland is framed as American assertiveness, and Europe reacts with outrage. The same nations that failed to spend on their own security now lecture America about respecting sovereignty. This is the culmination of a century-long pattern. Europe protected, supported, rebuilt by America. And when American interests are asserted, gratitude is replaced with indignation. From the blood of young soldiers in Europe to billions in aid and military support, the United States has repeatedly carried the weight of European survival. And yet history seems to teach Europe nothing about sacrifice, preparation, or humility. Greenland is not the story. America's generosity and Europe's ingratitude are.